so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to take about a minute and a half to tell you about a few sponsors that not only help to make it possible to produce this show 5 days a week, but that I'm also genuinely passionate about promoting. The first longtime stellar supporter of the show that I want to mention is Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online with over 8,000 video titles. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. The second sponsor I'm sincerely passionate about promoting is Purium. It's no mystery that bringing your mind, body, and spirit into balance is necessary if a person truly intends to manifest the greatest and grandest version of themselves. So if you've been looking for a way to easily get organic superfoods into your system every day with a simple plan that can help you reestablish a healthier foundation and relationship with food, like I was doing before I found Purium, I highly recommend going to positivehead.com/transformation and checking out the videos and interviews there where I dive deeply into discussions explaining why I take these products every day. And should you ultimately end up on iShopPurium.com to purchase any of their 50 plus amazing superfood products, be sure to use the code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, for a 25% discount. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's Soul Share episode, I'm super excited to have the lovely Elizabeth April here with me on the show. Elizabeth is a clairvoyant truth seeker and host of the relatively new, I believe, Expand with Elizabeth April podcast. Hey there, Elizabeth. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Brandon. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you for coming. I definitely have been looking forward to this. And, especially when I was like sort of checking out a little bit of your backstory and everything originally, I'm like, okay, this is going to be really interesting. Elizabeth has quite the journey and there's a lot of things I want to pick your brain about. But before I do, I'm going to be really, really predictable and start where I always start. And that is with this question. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
That's a great question. Absolutely. I would say my passion is helping humanity wake up from a long slumber. And I do that with knowledge and information. And I believe that knowledge and information will set someone free. So I try and I help people expand and reinvent their reality and become aware of who they really are. So that's my passion. That's my purpose. That's my mission. That's what I feel like I'm here to do. And some people may get that and some people, may not. And that's totally okay.
Yes, it is. And that's a great, great passion. And why don't you tell us how you landed on this passion? I'd love to hear. Your backstory is quite interesting from what the little bit I've seen. So I love stories and I'm pretty sure you have an interesting one. So why don't you give us a little background?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now in this current incarnation, I'm 26, about to be 27. And a lot of people look at that as a very young age, but I also feel like I've been living a double life in the way that I've been living my human life here in the third dimension, while simultaneously living a multitude of parallel lifetimes in many other dimensions. So I have a lot of experiences. I'll kind of go over from start to present, the experiences that I've had to kind of get me to the awareness that I have at this time. And then we can deep dive into any one or go in any direction that you kind of are drawn to, because there's many different facets. I'm
drawn to all of that so far. Yes.
So when I was 2 years old, my parents knew that I was like different, I guess. And I would, be following things in the room, talking to people or beings that weren't there, kind of having conversations, I guess. And then as I got older, my abilities became more clear. So things like clairvoyancy, seeing ghosts and spirits, chakras and auras around people as well, hearing thoughts, being very empathic, getting very overwhelmed with everyone's energy. So I was unable to go out to public places like restaurants and things like that because I would be, I didn't know at the time. I was just picking up on everyone's energy. We thought maybe it was social anxiety. Of course, it's just anxiety is another word for empath. Let's just be honest.
Yep.
And so, yeah. And so, and then, I would do weird things. Once again, didn't really know this was happening, but I would do weird things like, get out of my body at like 4 years old and hop into my cat's body just because I was curious to see what it felt like to be a cat. So then I would be like rubbing my cat face on the corner and just feeling how good it felt, not really knowing that was, astral traveling, remote viewing or body hopping, not normal, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
I would also, tell my friends that I could levitate and I would try and help them levitate as well. At like 6 years old, I would say, just, sit cross-legged, concentrate really hard. You got this. And I always had the urge. I always felt like I had telekinetic abilities. Like I would stare at my brother's model planes in the corner of his room and I would stare at them and concentrate so hard because I knew that I could move them. And yet they would never move. So there was a frustration there as well. There was a frustration. At the age of 10, I shut down all of my spiritual abilities. I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted to fit in. And so I just like really devoted my life to sports at that time. And that was great, but it led to a pretty deep depression. And at around the age of 14, 15, I was questioning my entire reality. I would turn to my friends in high school and say, do you ever wonder if there's something more than this? Have you ever really questioned what's around us? And they're like, what do you mean? We can drive now. This is fun, and it just was never enough for me. It was just never enough. So I went to doctors. I went to psychologists. I went to even a priest to ask, what is the point? What is the meaning? What are we here for? What is beyond this? I'm so unhappy with this. There's got to be something more. And no one could give me the answers that I was looking for. I don't even know what kind of question I was trying to ask, but I was so disappointed everywhere I looked. And once again, spiraled me into a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. And it wasn't until my dad, at the age of 16, suggested something called a past life regression. So for those people who don't know what this is, it's basically putting someone into a trance-like state where they are able to separate their human, their ego self, right, from their consciousness, pure conscious and Akashic records. And so I like to say that every lifetime we have lived in the past and every lifetime we will live in the future is actually all stored all around us. And some people call it the Akashic record. I like to call it 5D storage, 5D memory, right? Our soul knows it all. It has it all. So when you're in this state of trance, you're able to actually go back in time into who you used to be. So at 16 years old, I went into 5 past lifetimes. And I got my mind blown. about what was possible and, who I was before. I was different cultures, different ages, different religions, different genders, anything was possible. And in every single lifetime I went into at 16, I realized that I was a messenger. I was some sort of teacher. I was able to receive information and give it to help people in some sort of way. And finally, at 16, I remembered who I was and I realized what my purpose is in this lifetime, to once again spread that knowledge, to receive that information as pure as possible. So that's when I started to open up my abilities once again. It was around 16 years old because boom, all of a sudden, this isn't the only thing that's existing. I understand that there's so much more. And I started to really tap into that. And so before even really opening up my psychic abilities, I guess, I started giving other people past life regressions. So I would take other people into a trance-like state. Anyone, like I went to university at 18, anyone who would just listen to me, engineers, law students, whoever was open, I would just say, hey, you want to see something really cool? It's kind of like a party trick.
Right.
And I would just take them under. And so if you think about it, at such a young age, I had the ability to take, say, 100 people into, say, for example, 5 past lifetimes, which could potentially be 500 lifetimes that I get to witness just as the objective observer. So here I am going into lifetimes where people were, gurus, or people were savages, or people were enslaved, or lifetimes where people were actually trees or fish or even moss.
Wow.
Now, it wasn't until I was 18 years old where I had another, probably, the second biggest awakening of this lifetime anyway. And it was, I went away to a 10-day meditation retreat called Vipassana. So there's no talking, there's no interaction, 10 days, just you and your ego, completely confronting yourself. So I did that at 18. I knew I needed to go there. On the second day of meditation, I was taken from my room by interdimensional beings and I was abducted on a spaceship. And of course, this meditation retreat was Northern Canada in the middle of absolute nowhere, right beside a military base. Perfect place to take anyone who can't talk about it, right? So I had another 8 days of figuring out what the F just happened, the night before. I even, the next day, I actually ended up stealing a butter knife, which is ridiculous to even think about now. I stole the butter knife from the kitchen and I hid it under my bed. And I didn't want to hurt the beings. I just wanted proof. Like I just wanted I'm like, if I could just cut them, and get some green blood or like something to just prove
or butter them.
That they were there. Maybe they like butter. I don't know. No. So here I was, right? 18. I'm starting to open up. I'm taking the time to be with myself. I'm doing past life regressions on others. And then, wow, just like that, my whole reality shatters once again. And I'm like, okay, cool. I mean, I never discounted aliens, right? I mean, I figured there's got to be something out there in the universe, but I didn't really realize that they were here, like on the planet and like actually like, physically.
Well, now the government
people.
the government is just acknowledging it as of the last few weeks of this recording. It's like,
I know.
It's
such
so
an
wonderful.
exciting time.
So exciting.
So that blew my reality open. Now, during past life regression, I would take all my victims, I just call them victims for now. No, my students, right? I would take all these beautiful people into this trance-like state and I would say, I want you to go to your most significant lifetime off of this planet. Hey, now that I knew that other life on other planets exists, let's explore that. And I started to explore that. Now, not only did I start exploring other people's past lifetimes off this planet, I started to actually hop into a parallel version of myself in another dimension. This is really wild. I'm just going to go for it.
Yes, please.
So after my reality was blown open that aliens did exist, and here I am starting to astral travel and lucid dream and remote view, and telepathy was really, coming back strong. So all these things came back to me. I would be walking down the hallway of my university going to class, and all of a sudden I would hop into another body on a spaceship, walking down the hallway of a spaceship as an 8-foot tall gray Zeta being.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah. So I just want to explain this one experience in depth, and then I want to go through the rest of the story. But so the first time I ever saw myself as a tall gray Zeta, I was meditating in my room. I was 18. I was meditating in my room. This was maybe 3 weeks after the meditation retreat. And I was sitting down. I was feeling kind of lightheaded, so I knew I just needed to sit and quiet my mind. And instantly, I'm just taken out of my body, and I'm basically translated in another body that I knew was my own. I knew it was me from another lifetime, and I figured it was a past, which it was. And it was a tall, 8-foot tall gray being. And I was standing in this really dimly lit room as this gray being. I'm looking around the room and I'm like, oh, this is kind of weird, but really cool. And I go ahead and I look down at my hand, right? My gray hand. And there's 4 fingers. And as I'm taking a look at each finger, there's a little white light orb that pops up right at the tip of each finger. I'm like, ooh, that's really cool. So now I have 4 orbs on each of the tips of my fingers. And then as I'm looking at it, a bigger orb pops up right in the palm of my hand. So here I am now. I'm like, ooh, this is really cool. So then I think to myself, right? So here I am, 18 years old in this parallel version of this tall gray male self of mine. And I'm looking at my hand and I'm like, I wonder what those orbs can do. Boom. Instantly, I get this deep voice that comes back at me. It's me from the past coming in saying, manipulate material. I'm like, yes, this is what I've always, I knew I was telekinetic, and this is why, right? All of a sudden these pieces of my puzzle started coming back to me. I'm like, ooh, so I shake it off, right? So I shake the orbs off intuitively. I'm just walking as this gray being. I walk into the next room over. It's a much smaller room, still very dimly lit, still in a spaceship, very clearly. And it was the biggest trip, still is the biggest trip of my life, happened in that moment. So here I am, 18 in a gray body, looking at this scene. Now in front of me, there was 3 other medium height grays, maybe 5 or 6 feet tall, medium height grays. And they were all looking at and kind of examining this human man who was sitting in this metal chair in the middle of the room. And there was one light that was like shining on this man, and then all the grays were kind of checking him out. Now this human man was very scared, right? So I'm 18, I'm looking at this scene and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so those are definitely aliens. And that man is definitely a human, but he's not the human that I am familiar with. And I take a closer look at him and I start seeing these features. Now, it's funny because at the time I was taking an anthropology class in university. So I kind of knew like Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, you kind of knew the lineage. I identified this man as a Homo erectus. So it was right when they started, right when we, I guess, started standing up straighter. But his back was still a bit hunched. He was very furry, I guess. He was very hairy. Dark hair, like brown hair, beard, kind of hair's all mangled. And the biggest feature, well, 2, I guess, not just the humped back, but the speech. He didn't have any speech whatsoever or language. And then the second thing was his forehead was really protruding. And I'm like, wow, okay. So instantly, not only did I realize and recognize and harmonize with a parallel self of mine coming from a past lifetime off this planet, but I also instantly targeted the timeline of when I was that alien being. Right? Because it was at the time when humans were just about to become Homo sapiens. Which is incredible. So since then, I've been working with that self of mine because he was, I guess, time simultaneous. He was the Zeta ambassador for that species at that time for about 600 human years. On that spaceship. So as that Zeta ambassador, I had a lot of abilities. Like I was able to stretch time, and I was a big part of creating the hybridization project between the Greys and the humans. Of course, we were working with the Galactic Federation. I mean, this was not against human will because we cannot override human free will. So yeah, so that was that. I've been harmonizing with Hera, which is that Grey name, ever since. And then since then, I got away from past life regression. What I found was not every human was able to let go of their egos so that they could experience everything I wanted to show them. So I said, if I'm just regressing other people and I'm taking them places, why can't I just regress myself and take myself anywhere? And that's what I did. So now with clients, I help them realize their past lifetimes, their cosmic ancestry, their families up on other ships, their purpose, their soul contracts. I'm getting away from that now. And all I want to do is I want to write books. I have so much knowledge and information. And one last thing, up until this timeline of 26, a couple of years ago at 24, I got a hypnosis regression session, a quantum hypnosis regression session myself. And I went into my childhood
QHHT?
Between the age.
Was it QHHT?
I think so, yeah. Yeah. And I went into my childhood because I had a lot of blocked memories. I thought maybe it was trauma, something hidden there. And between the age of 4 and 13, I was taken by the Greys multiple times on board this ship. And I was put into something that I like to call, Earth School. And they taught me all about consciousness. They taught me quantum physics. They taught me Tesla technology. They taught me electromagnetism. They taught me vibrational frequency. They taught me like everything that I channel and download and know to be true today. And so I realized, and I found out those memories at that time a couple years ago, and obviously have been integrating and applying those ever since. But the three main topics that I love kind of integrating, not separating, but integrating is cosmic disclosure, right? We all got to know that aliens do exist. Quantum physics, because we all have to know, that this world is a vibrational frequency projection. It's not actually real. It's a complete illusion. And then the third thing is spiritual awakening. Like we got to all raise our own vibration to get on the path of the fifth dimension frequency, or else we're going to be left behind. So I now communicate with the Galactic Federation and the Greys all the time, talking about what does humanity need to know? What information can I put out there? They've told me about the Mandela effect back in 2016. They basically said our one reality collapsed in 2012, and now we're in two split parallel realities, and we've been kind of hopping back and forth and all of that great stuff. So anyway, I'm sure that's a little bit of a download, but that is only a portion of, my history on this planet, but it's been quite incredible so far.
So far, it is not boring. It doesn't sound. So I got a couple of questions for you. So first off, when you were taken, abducted, from the retreat at 18, I believe you said, it was like a physical experience for you? So it wasn't just like I'm meditating and I'm having a vision of this, like all of a sudden they're standing in your room, you feel that you're awake and they're just like teleporting you out kind of thing?
Absolutely. I mean, it was such a clear memory. It was like, it still is burned into my mind. From the point where they were hovering over me and they sprayed something to kind of, paralyze me, because I was very aware. My eyes were open. My consciousness was open, but I couldn't move my body. I couldn't speak. I couldn't scream. I couldn't do anything. And they basically hauled me up to their ship and they put something in my ear. They actually planted a chip. I saw the device and everything. There was about 10 of them standing in front of me. These were the tall whites. They were quite a fearsome, very kind of fearful type of being. A lot of fear involved in that experience. Yeah. And I think part of the reason why I needed to have that experience was to have compassion over people who feel very fearful around aliens, because other than that one small experience, my only experiences with aliens, which is a lot, is really positive, like overwhelmingly positive.
Wow.
Yeah. And when I was a kid too, it was all physical, like to the point where I could see the two little Greys kind of like Tweedledee and Tweedledum beside my bed, speaking to me telepathically, telling me that they've got something up on the ship and all of that. That was all very physical as well. Now, most of the connection that I have is very non-physical, and it's just easier that way.
Right. Wow. So, yeah. So that's interesting that was the only experience that you had where it was sort of, a negative experience. I mean, how long did you, do you have any idea what it is that they were implanting? What it is they were trying to do? I mean, what is your sort of takeaway from that?
Yes. Yeah. So I went to a, what does she call herself? Like a psychic surgery woman afterwards. I was kind of seeking help, and she synchronistically came into my life. And so I spoke to her and I said, look, something happened. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Can you please scan me and like do your thing? So she scans my energy. She's like, yep, I see something. There's an implant. There's a chip in your right ear. And of course, like 2 weeks, before that, they freaking chipped me in my ear. And I ended up waking up that night after the abduction. Waking up, it wasn't waking up because I was awake the whole time. I looked at the time; it was 3:30, and I went to my right ear because I knew they implanted something, and there was just a drop of blood. And luckily, there was that drop of blood because that allowed me to have that tiny bit of proof. But this woman scanning my energy and saying that I had that in there, I asked her why. They said that she used this analogy. She said, imagine them up on their ship, taking a look at planet Earth, and it's just a sea of darkness, right? Just a sea of darkness. She's like, there was like a shining light on the planet. And she says they were so curious as to why your vibration was so high that they ended up taking you, chipping you to track you. And she says, this chip that's in your ear is actually now energetically connected to your heart. And it's also connected to your crown chakra. So it was monitoring my heart palpitations and also my vibrational frequency from my crown to see what I was doing, when I was doing it, and how I was doing it as a human, which is so interesting. Wow. And then she ended up removing it, which is beautiful. And ever since then, I've kind of had this weird drainage from my right ear. But other than that, it's all good.
Wow. That's intense. I had a former partner whose mother swears when her older sister was a baby that physical aliens came in, and it was like this frightening thing. They came in and like she was, she'd barely talk about it, but a lot of times you hear, where it's people, they don't necessarily know if it was physical, you don't hear, there's a lot of people who feel, of course there's plenty of people that talk about being physically abducted, but there's a lot that, it's like, it doesn't feel, they're not sure, And that's really, really a whole nother level, especially when it's like a negative kind of experience like that. I mean, you're bold that you even went back to meditate again. I imagine you were a bit traumatized afterwards and scared to like, oh my gosh, they're going to come back or.
Well, at the time I was doing a lot of astral projection. And so I was really worried that if I left my body, because like I felt watched, like it was just this weirdest feeling. So when she said that, I'm like, yes, they've been watching me. So I was so worried that if I left my body that they could come into the body. So I stopped probably astral traveling for quite some time until I felt like them watching me or having that kind of energetic pressure was gone. And it was, and I've been fine ever since. The whole ordeal lasted maybe a month or two. Until I started really waking up and realizing why that experience happened, because it activated and unlocked some DNA codes within me to say, oh shit, we're all actually aliens. We're all hybrids. And that's what I truly believe now today.
Wow. So, okay. So now fast forward to the 8-foot, the 8-foot gray experience. And you said there was a sort of the caveman sort of figure. And one thing I wasn't 100% sure on, are you saying that the caveman was another incarnation of yours as well? So it was like you or not? I wasn't quite sure on that. No, it was
just... Okay. No, so my incarnation was just the gray. The caveman was just a human man, but what a trip it is to be a human in an alien body observing another human in front of you. Yeah, totally. It was just the whole, like, I'm like, what is going on right now? It was just, it still is one of the biggest trips, I've ever gone through, So wild.
Right. Now and I know it's like, this always gets very weird to talk about in general, like this whole idea that we're all one and we're all separate. and both. And it's
Yeah.
like, I call them, it's like relative truths, right? Well, what perspective are we speaking from? So from one perspective, you and this gray are the same entity. It's just like degrees of separation even. And then from another, you're separate, right? And it's just like, what perspective are we speaking from? So from one perspective, you're the same being. And so in that moment, was he aware of Elizabeth April and like, okay, like this other version of me is this, female on this Earth planet in the future is here observing this. And he was like sort of aware of you?
Yeah, completely. And it's cool because with astral traveling and remote viewing, I have been very curious about all of the different perspectives in every kind of scene that I've ever been a part of. So when I astral travel over to a Galactic Federation ship, they will see me astral travel into the ship and they'll recognize me. They're like, oh, hey, sometimes they call me Hira. Sometimes they call me Elizabeth. Sometimes I'll just actually transform my astral body into an 8-foot tall gray so that they actually recognize me more than because I was the ambassador of that ship. So instantly they're like, oh, Hira. But it's so beautiful because the other day, it was maybe 6 months ago, I went to a council meeting, and they were having issues with the hybrids. So I kind of had to hop in and try and help and problem solve. And so they left a seat open for me at the council, and I was there just as my astral self. And so I sat at the seat at the council, and I transformed my astral body from a little tiny 5'0" human, body to the gray, to the Hira that they recognize. And they all told me telepathically, they said, no, Elizabeth, we don't want Hira to sit in on this meeting. We want Elizabeth to sit in on this meeting. Wow. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I started crying, like, oh, this is so beautiful,
Hira would never bawl like this.
It's true. Grace don't cry.
Right.
It was such a beautiful moment. It really was. So.
Wow, that's pretty epic. So you touched on something that I think it's really interesting that's popped up a lot, the mandala effect and this idea of like simultaneous timelines. And, you've heard people out there, I'm sure have heard some of it, like that you've got like one of the things in pop culture that popped up that comes to mind is like the Berenstein Bears or the Berenstein Bears. How was it spelled? And some people remember it one way. Others remember this movie with Sinbad, Shazam or something, a couple of these things over the last few years have popped up. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that whole thing a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I will just I should have prefaced with this, but I'll say it now. A little bit of a disclaimer is because I'm a channeler and from a very young age, actually at the age of 16, when I did my past life regression, I was told by my guides or higher self, whoever, that I should not do any external research. Okay. So that means that I have never watched a documentary. I've never read a book. I've never on quantum physics, on aliens, on spirituality, none of it, right?
Really?
So
never read a book? Really. Wow. That's incredible.
I've never read a book on spirituality, quantum physics, or aliens. Never.
Wow. That's
I was told not to. And the reason why I was told not to at 16 years old was they're like, okay, you're opening up again, but be aware that you do not want to muddle your own perception with other people's perceptions. Okay. I'm already dealing with a 26-year-old version of myself trying to get the ego all in there, and I have to separate that in order to be able to channel the information as pure as possible. So the beautiful thing about that is that people will come up to me saying, oh, do you know Joe Dispenza? Wow. You talk about his stuff all the time. Oh, do you know Nietzsche? Oh man, you're so talking about Nietzsche's stuff. Oh, Plato, Da Vinci, Tesla, and it's great because I think we're all channeling the same information, right? Especially the closer you are to that truth. But it's really important for me to put that out there to say, it's also a strength, right? But it's also my greatest weakness because I don't know names of things. I don't know relations of things. So I just kind of know what I know, and I'm completely limited to my own bubble of reality. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, that's interesting. because I say the same thing about myself as like people are like, oh, what podcast do you listen to or what? It's like, it's always been, and it's funny to hear you say that because I say the same thing. It's like, it's my greatest strength. And it's also at times a weakness because I'm a little bit of an island where it's like, I just like to do things my own way. It's like when I don't want to hear, now I haven't went that far. Like I've definitely read some books and things, but I'm really a lot less interested in what other people are doing than, it's like, oh, I just like tuning into me, and whatever I'm pulling through. And so, but you've went to a whole nother level with it because I've definitely exposed myself. But, there, as you know, there are people out there who just are devouring everything from every angle too. You know what I mean? And so I've definitely never been that. So anyway, I cut you off there, but
my parents always laughed. They're like, so you want to write all these books. And like, since I was like, a kid, I would be in the backyard pacing with a notepad and paper saying, I need to write. I don't know what it is.
Wow.
And when I was 12, I actually emailed Oprah Winfrey, because she was huge at that time. And I'd always watch Oprah, at the, after school or whatever with my mom. And I wrote her an email. I said, Oprah, my name is Elizabeth. I'm 12 years old, and I'm writing you to let you know that I'm going to be the youngest author. So I figured that you'd want to have me on your show. And I'm like, wow, so
That's
ballsy.
So great.
Like such a ballsy 12-year-old. Like seriously. Anyway, so that's it. I want to talk about the Mandela effect.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes. So that's a little disclaimer. Once again, all I know is what I know, and that's it. So back in 2012, it was actually December 21st, 2011. I was invited to a Galactic Federation meeting. Okay, this is weird. At 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I was greeted by a Palladian, pure white light being in my room. I'm like, what? Who are you? And they told me about this meeting, and they said, come, you have to be awake. You have to be conscious as a human, and you have to come to this meeting. You have to stay up at 4 a.m. You have to come to this meeting. And I'm like, okay, well, where do I go? And they're like, you're just going to know where to go. I'm like, okay. So anyway, at that time, I went to this meeting. There was a lot of us there, a lot of beings, all different kinds of beings, all a part of the Galactic Federation, who were also there. And there was a ton of astral body beings there too. Lots of humans who were projecting there to be there.
Interesting.
And this was a meeting of the 144,000. I don't know if you've ever heard of this concept. I know that I never heard of this concept before that night. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. Yeah, I have heard of this. I think it's a Bible. It's referenced in the Bible originally.
It has been referenced in a lot of different kind of scriptures and religions and ancient texts. Once again, I don't really know. But yeah, so they basically explained this concept of the 144,000. They basically said this is the key number of not ascended masters, but higher vibrational beings that needed to come to planet Earth to volunteer their energy, their time to be here to uplift the vibration of the planet to get to the fifth dimension. They didn't call it that, but they said to this next level, right? And so I'm like, oh, cool. So they said we invited all of the 144,000 or whoever is there at that time, and all of the alumni of the 144,000 is what they said. And then they had this whole meeting and they said, look, something's about to happen in 2012. And so I'm like, oh no, the world is ending, because everyone was talking about it.
Right.
And they said, no, the world isn't ending, but the reality as we know it is ending. And that's it. And they didn't go into any more detail about that. So I'm like, okay, cool. And they kind of planted the seed and, we really need your strength and help and support at this time, your teachers, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Also, a really interesting point. The meeting of the Galactic Federation was in the center of the moon. I don't know if you knew that the moon was like a giant satellite device, but it's actually hollow on the inside.
I've heard the theories, it rings like a bell when something hits it, when a meteor, hits it or whatever. So, or asteroid.
I don't know what's out there. I just know what I experienced, and I just went inside the moon. I'm like, what? This is hollow? Anyway, It was really cool. So then fast forward to 2016, I was once again greeted by a Palladian being in my room. I usually talk to them when I talk to the Galactic Federation. And he said, we have some really important information for you to share with the world. And I said, okay. And at this point, at 2016, I hadn't put anything out there. I was channeling a lot, but no one knew who I was. So I actually just started my online career in 2016. And so they brought me up to their ship. They brought me up to the Palladian Security Council, this kind of like, once again, boardroom type of thing. And they had a hologram projector in the room, and they projected 2 Earths on the hologram projector. And they said, take a look at this. So I'm looking at this hologram projector, and I'm taking a look at Earth 1 and Earth 2. They look identical. And I said, what's going on here? Like, what is this? Like, why are there 2 Earths? And they explained to me that back in 2012, there was a collapsing of one of our realities, like our main reality that we've always been in. And this is kind of where quantum physics kind of comes in a little bit. So we collapsed one main reality, the reality as we knew it. Nothing really happened. We actually just all hopped into the very next parallel reality. Now, the problem was that back in 2012, there was an awakening that had already been started quite a while before that. And the vibrational frequency on the planet was already polarized at the time that the reality collapsed. Now, it is quantum physics that states that 2 frequencies of a different vibration cannot coexist in the same space. That's why if you're like really high vibe and you go into a bar, you start to feel sick. It's because it's a different vibrational frequency. Same thing happened on this planet. And what they explained to me was that in our reality collapsing, we actually, as an entire collective conscious humanity, we ended up hopping and splitting the Earth into not just the next parallel reality over. We were so divided that we hopped into the next 2 parallel realities over. So then we divided and split our current reality into 1 3rd dimension frequency and 1 5th dimensional frequency. And ever since 2012, all of us individually and collectively, in a sense, have been hopping in and out of one vibration and another vibration. That's why we're all having high highs and super low lows, and we're all being pushed at this time to purge out all of that 3D stuff that doesn't serve us. And then the next major timeline to be aware of is the timeline between 2020 and 2024 is when the 3rd dimension reality collapses altogether. Now, back in 2012, they actually showed me the 3D Earth. Back in 2016, they showed me the 3D Earth imploding. Like, it literally looked like a ton of bombs went off, like nuclear bombs.
Wow.
And they basically said that this is the fate of the 3rd dimension, and everyone is meant to hop over. Not everyone, but most people are meant to hop over to the 5th dimension frequency before that cataclysm happens. And that's why, I don't know, like, if you've interviewed these people as well, for years, for probably 10 years, I was getting apocalyptic dreams of bombs going off and a whole Yes, and a lot of other channelers. People tell me that a lot of other channelers also had these apocalyptic dreams ever since 2016, and I found out about the Mandela effect. I basically stopped having the apocalyptic dreams because I'm like, oh, I get to choose? And I was so confused because for all those years leading up to it, I was like, why am I getting these dreams of this beautiful utopian society where we're all telepathic and we're hugging each other, and then simultaneously getting, these insights and these dreams about the apocalypse, basically? How can they both happen simultaneously? The Mandela effect is basically what's happening. And now we're just hopping into multiple different parallel realities in every single moment. And I teach people how to control the ability to hop in and out of these states of being.
Right. Yeah, that is intuitively what I've felt for a long time. It's like whenever I hear people talk about the doom and gloom potentials, I'm like, yeah, but there's all these other possibilities. I mean, from my perspective, I believe that there's so many various timelines and potentials. Like from this moment forward, there's versions of you and I that do all kinds of different things, and so once you start understanding, it's like, oh, hold on, I'm in my own private, YO universe, and I get to choose where I navigate it, which timeline I step in and out of. So it's not like I'm so affected by all these other things because I'm literally having my own private experience, and everything is a prop in my own private movie to a certain degree. Like, for me, that's been a super empowering perspective to take, because it's like, okay, I'm the only one here. Yeah. Like, you're a prop in my movie right now, and vice versa. I'm just like reflecting a part of your consciousness back to you that looks and sounds and resonates like this, and so it's like, and it makes sense when you understand, of course, that the whole idea that we're all one, we're all extensions of each other. It's like, we're God-godding. Like, I don't know. Have you ever seen the short story, The Egg? Probably not, because you don't watch. Okay, it's this wonderful short story, and it's like, it basically goes into this concept in a very interesting way. And it's like, it says, look, once you've lived every life in every perspective, then you'll have grown enough to be an egg and be born. Like, you're basically the only one in the room at all times. You always have been. And it's, there's a part of that that's kind of like, oh my gosh, I got to live every life, but then when you think about being eternal and, the idea of eternity, I mean, your mind really can't even, it just melts down even at the thought of such a thing. But I've never felt really particularly fearful about a future timeline that is, I even think, like, let's say I'm standing here right now and there's a guy in front of me who's like super negative and everything's coming to an end and all that. It's almost like I feel like we're like ships passing in the night. Like, from this moment forward, I can go into this whole other timeline. He can go into another timeline where maybe there's even a version of Brandon there who didn't quite catch the train, right? So he would maybe run into me years later and say, see, I told you that it's all going to hell. We're all, look what's happening. The nukes are going off. And meanwhile, the version of me that he talked to years earlier is in this utopian society. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's sort of my best way I can sort of envision it.
So it's so interesting in starting to teach. I mean, I love quantum physics. I love the Mandela effect. And I've been teaching it. It's not the only thing I talk about because it's not the only thing that's existing. But since I started teaching it and talking about it, I've had really cool incidences with clients. So one of my clients, super interesting. She calls me up and she's like, Elizabeth, I had this incredible conversation with my husband last night and you were so right. I held the vibration. I didn't, lower myself to match him. I held the vibration. I was in the fifth dimension and all of a sudden he rose his vibration to me. And we had this incredible conversation. But Elizabeth, I get in the car with him this morning and we go grocery shopping together. And I turn to him and I say, what a great conversation we had last night. And he turns back and says, what conversation? We didn't talk last night. Oh, and so,
oh my God.
in the third dimension frequency, which is parallelly, existing, right? Simultaneously existing. In the third dimension, they never had that conversation at all. In the fifth dimension, they had that conversation. In the next day, he hopped back into the third dimension. She continued to be in the fifth dimension. He remembered what happened in the third dimension the previous night. She remembered what happened in the fifth dimension. And so that right there, that's what I call a glitch in the matrix. Now, typically, those two people should remember the same reality. And nowadays, it's really wild to see what's happening. So ever since I was younger, I would always do weird things to switch up my reality. So, and I never knew why I did this. And I never even knew that it was switching up my current reality state. So I would take like a pen, and I still do this all the time. I take a pen or whatever I can get my hands on, and I throw it across the room. And I think to myself, in another reality, my natural autopilot programming, I would have never done that. And I decided to go out on a limb and change my reality. Now I'm at this point where my third eye is so open, and this is so cool and a little overwhelming at times. I'll be sitting at my desk and all of a sudden I see myself get up, go over to the fridge, grab a glass of water. Then I see another version of myself get up, go over to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. Then I see myself get up, go over to the water or the plants, water the plants, right? So all of a sudden, and then I'm like, I can now see all of the different timelines simultaneously. I mean, there's infinite ones, but the next 3 ones over. And then I can choose what outcome I want to have because I'm seeing all of the timelines simultaneously. Do I want to do that? Or do I want to just sit right here? You know what? I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to throw a pen across
Let them do all the work. Oh my gosh. That's wild. It actually reminds me of the show I watched a while back. I think it's called Travelers, where the guy, he started having that experience where he would see all the alternate timelines, and it's exactly described like that. He would sit there and watch them all out. And I've often thought about that, like, is that, because I haven't had that experience yet, but I felt intuitively that that's an experience that would come. you know? And I often wondered, would there be challenging timelines that we would be sort of, because I have friends like yourself who are having these multidimensional experiences, very similar to what you're talking about, where they're here and all of a sudden they're, you know, like I've told this story multiple times. My friend who every night she dreams lucidly, she's like, Brandon, I could tell you 1,000 lifetimes in detail. Like, it's like I'll be walking and it just shifts sometimes for me. Or, you know, I'm sitting here at the piano and all of a sudden I'm in the 1800s playing the piano, and then I can play the same song she's playing and crying about in that timeline. And even though I never learned how to play here, and like craziness. And so one of the things that's popped up for me is like, okay, I felt intuitively that some of that, it made sense to me that, and intuitively, logically and intuitively, that this would be a byproduct of part of our ascension, right? Starting to see these other us's. And then it occurred to me, and maybe with a little bit of trepidation, the idea bubbled up as, are we going to be forced to see like difficult timelines, and that's how we sort of like move through them without having to fully experience them? Is that a thing, or is that just my own fear bubbling up a little bit? Like, you know what I mean? So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, absolutely. It's so incredible. And you know what? Every single human on this planet has been experiencing parallel timelines and past life versions of themselves in every moment without even realizing it. You got a pain in your left shoulder. You're like, I don't know where this pain comes from. I've never had an injury here. It's actually a past lifetime that's coming up where you ended up getting stabbed in the shoulder. You're just not clear enough, you know, or conscious enough to realize that that's what's coming up.
And somehow it's linked to that moment. So the past life, it's somehow there's a link, right? Yeah.
Yes. Either it's that person who stabbed you, who came into your life in the present moment, you know, in this lifetime. Right. Maybe it's a lesson that you didn't learn in that lifetime and you ended up getting stabbed, and then you're trying to learn the lesson again in this lifetime. So I'll give you a really interesting situation that happened to me a couple months ago in February. I went to a festival called Tribal Gathering, and it's 60 different tribes from 30 different countries all over the world coming together in Panama to share their plant medicine and their knowledge and their wisdom and what have you. So I believe that we can, you know, kill our ego, and we can ascend our vibration, and we can experience and open our third eye without plant medicine. I just want to like put that out on there. But yeah, so I was there, and I ended up getting this local guy. He was drunk. And it was like this one night I was walking alone on the beach, and he ended up stealing my stuff and punching me in the face. And it could have definitely been a lot worse, but I fought back because I'm like a little bit feisty and a bit of a rugby player, and probably think that I'm bigger than I am. So I fought back. And after the quite traumatic incident, right, of just going through being robbed and getting beat up because of it or whatever, I went back to my tent. I mean, obviously security was called and all of that. But when I went back, my friend was there. She did cranial energy work, and she started working on me, and I was laying down, and I was calming down. And in that moment, it took about 5 minutes to go through about 45 past lifetimes, all where I was abused by men in past lifetimes, and I never said anything. I never did anything. I never stood in my power. I allowed people to take advantage of me, especially men. And I never fought back. And in one of those lifetimes, the guy who punched me in the face to steal my phone, in Panama, he was actually my husband in a past lifetime, and he was very physically abusive. And I never stood up for myself. I never fought back. And in this lifetime, I tackled him like 3 times. I mean, I like kicked him, I punched him, whatever. I gave him a run for his money, and I needed that situation to happen. It was a traumatic situation in this lifetime. You know, all is well that ends well. You know, it was really beautiful at the end, and I was able to clear 40 lifetimes. And not only that, but some of those lifetimes, I was actually the abuser. I was the male being abusive to my wife because I was abused as a kid. So now all of a sudden, I start having compassion for the guy who just punched me in the face, because he's got to be in a much worse situation in life than I am for him to do that, project his anger. Exactly.
Yep.
And so not only I'm just so grateful. So you're talking about these challenging situations. Now, typically these things happen to people all the time. We call it bad luck. It's not bad luck. Everything's divine.
Right.
Everything's synchronistic.
Right.
We create our own reality. We wrote our own blueprints for the challenges, hurdles, and successes for our life. And so these situations happen to us in the moment. It's like, oh no, my phone just got stolen and I just got punched in the face. And you could, be in that moment, or you can open yourself up and meditate and realize, why did this happen? And once people kind of stop reacting and start just being objectively aware, consciously, then all of the memory will come back to them. So, I mean, talking about channeling or being a psychic, I believe everyone is psychic. I believe everyone can channel. I believe everyone can do all of that, because I believe we're actually way more powerful beings than just who we've been taught that we are, right? This is
Right.
educated, regurgitating type of sheeple kind of society, right? We're not
Right.
just that. We are incredible beings who have alien and interdimensional DNA within us that is just waiting to unlock.
Yeah, I feel that. Absolutely. And you touched on something that is a big point that I make all the time on the show, and probably the most challenging point that I make all the time on the show, which is I don't believe there's ever been a victim in all of eternity, and I get it. I get why that's like a hot button and that like burns some people up, especially those who have had, trauma or something very significant in this lifetime, or to someone that they love, even maybe more intense, And when you start to realize that, hold on, I understand that it's painful. I'm not saying it's not painful and difficult and challenging. I'm not discounting any of that. I'm just trying to say you're actually not a victim. There is a design that's going on, and you're such a badass that you've chosen this course of action to, well, what about the people starving here? They're such badasses that they've chosen this course of action to evolve their untouchable soul from the ultimate perspective. So yes, they're probably a lot braver. Those of us, before we go in, we're just going to go into this projected holographic reality. Yeah, I'm going to be killed this time, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, whatever. I know I'm an eternal being. Then you get here, you forget all that, and it's like, oh my God, this is serious, and this life means everything, and I'm scared to death, and oh my gosh, look at the trauma that happened. How can you think that's by design? And it's like just having a limited perspective on the much bigger game that's going on. And I think as people can start to lift the veil on that true ultimate truth, it brings a sense of empowerment and a way to start processing. Like you just gave a great example. The guy, like, you got to tap into what it was like to be the aggressor, right? It's like the short story, the egg. The guy's talking to God after he died, and he goes, hold on, so you mean I've been everybody? So I was Hitler and all the people he killed. It's like you play all the sides so that you can have this full perspective and sort of emerge from it ultimately. And this game is way bigger than our single lifetimes, as you've sort of pointed out here. As my friend Shelby, I mentioned earlier, she's like, Brandon, how many of the thousands that I can see do you want to know? And hers, you can almost see it on her. She's almost like a little exhausted from it. It's almost like, I just want like something to stay the same, like, and so it's, it's an intense thing that we've signed up here for. It's not for the light of, it's not for, I think there's probably a lot of souls, I've heard it said there's a lot of beings that look at us as like, oh gosh, you guys are the crazy ones, the adventurous ones to go and do this particular type of like cutting edge adventure.
Absolutely. Yeah. You bring up a couple of good points. I always say the same thing. One of the biggest questions that I get asked, especially from very religious or Christian type of people, is, well, then, if we are our own God, right? As I always say that. If we are our own God, then why is there so much suffering? Why would I put all this suffering in my life? It just, that doesn't make sense. I don't want to suffer. Give me $1 million then if I'm creating my own, and there's this energy there. And so I tell them, right? And I've seen this and I've experienced this. And even though everyone kind of has their own kind of interpretation or answer, I say this, imagine if you had everything you could possibly ever want as a human, right? Just let's put it into the human. You had all the money, you had all the connections, you had all the job opportunity, you had whatever you wanted. I don't know, all the toys, all the cars, whatever.
The dream partner.
Give it, your dream partner, right? Give it a week, a month, a year. It's going to get boring. If there's no challenge, if there's
give it a million
trial,
years, give it a million years. Then that's what I say. Now have that thing for about 100 million years and tell me how you feel about it. That favorite meal becomes disgusting.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And there's no challenge. I always say that you were strong enough to choose this on your path because you knew that you could get through this, you know?
Yep.
And that's why. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up was, so you said, so I think this is part of the ascension process, is remembering the past lifetimes, right? Really recollecting that. And so, so absolutely. And so if you think about the word or the term waking up, this is really cool, right? So I believe that a part of the awakening is a vibrational shift upward, right? An ascension of vibration upward, which is fantastic. But another big part of the awakening is waking up to who we really are. And so if I told one person that they were, a slave back in the day, in colonial, whatever, they would identify just with that one thing and that one thing only. And then if I say, well, you've been 100 trillion different lifetimes, both on and off this planet. And guess what? You can be animals. You can be a dog. You could be a tree. You could be a blade of grass.
Right.
And you can be all of the countless infinite number of beings out there. Then all of a sudden, this question of, well, who am I really, does not have anything at all to do with the individual interpretation or projection in that moment. And it has to do with your vibrational frequency. It has to do with your soul. Right? I mean, we can't associate who we are. Oh, well, once I was this water bottle and now this is who I am, and it doesn't work like that. We cannot associate to our individual incarnations because every individual incarnation is just a projection of who we really are, which is that vibrational frequency, which is really everything all at once simultaneously.
Right. Which is an awful lot to take in and remember. I think for everyone has their own process, and we're all at different points in that unique process to remembering. For some, it's like, your case, it was to be blasted open at a really young age and have really intense, experiences at a very young age. For others, they're listening to this right now and they're, 65 years old and they're just starting to even consider, these ideas as a possibility in their life, much less being taken up into a ship. Right. So it's very interesting how all of us, I think we got to be really careful not to ever compare ourselves. I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls for people is like, oh my gosh, look at what Elizabeth is doing and what am I doing? And I haven't had that experience. And therefore, this is something is wrong with me, or, we're all on our own unique path back to, where I think it's going to end where it started. This is how God experiences herself throughout eternity,
Yep. Yeah.
All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. One question that that came up for me, and you touched on it a little bit, and I just want to circle back to it a little bit more, is this idea this person that punched you on the beach was actually an ex-husband kind of thing. How often are you, with your current level of multidimensional perception, are you sort of becoming aware of people. I think back to one of my favorite interviews a long time back was Dr. Eben Alexander, this Harvard neurosurgeon. He got a lot, he was on like Oprah and stuff because he got a ton of attention with this book because he got meningitis. Here's the Harvard brain specialist whose brain gets destroyed. He comes out of it after a week. They said, pull the plug, your brain is fried. He miraculously recovers. And all he remembers is his time on the other side and shares, how this whole thing is structured. And, he talks about how we reincarnate in soul families often. I had someone on this show recently. He's like, oh, Brandon, yeah, you have, about 20% of your guests you have significant karmic ties to, and you have more than others you have ties to, but about 20% it's really significant. And so now, and that was maybe, 6 months ago or something or less. And so now every time I'm like, oh, that makes sense, right? We attract back the same people. So here we are talking, we've just met. It's like, how often, my brain always goes to, I wonder if there's any history with this individual that's bumping up into my 3D reality out of 7 billion people on the planet. The chance of you bumping up against anyone is like hitting the lotto 100 times in a row or something. If you look at it, 1 in 7 billion, right? So yeah, I'm curious how much your perception is bringing you to, okay, this person in my life was this to me, or, oh, I'm meeting this new person again, apparently, and, perceiving any sort of past or even future, timelines or, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, a couple things that I want to mention on that. The first one, I completely agree. I actually want to take it to even a further extent to say, even the people that we pass and we smile at on the street are people that have been in our past lifetimes before. I mean,
oh, I like that.
I mean, it's crazy. So you smile at someone and, of course you have stronger feelings with other people or the clerk behind the counter. And you're like, wow, I definitely feel that connection, or you don't. But most likely they're going to be at some point, in your frequency in the past before, either on, off this planet, past, future, which is really incredible. And so, asking the question of, with the ability to tap in, how often am I aware of those kind of connections? And the thing is, because I've been so open at such a young age, I think one of my best qualities and traits is the ability to be completely human and be completely non-human in a sense. So I have a really great ability to open myself completely and close myself. Once again, as a kid, I wasn't able to go to any public places because I was too open. So at a very early age, I needed to learn what it was to be human, to shut that off so I can just be present and have a full conversation with someone and not be a space cadet. So what I like to say is that my channeling abilities, or really anyone's channeling ability, is like, I like to call it the universal Google, right? So imagine you had Google as a search engine in front of you and you could ask Google any questions. And really, Google is, quite a knowledge base. So anything you really want to know or need to know is there. And typing that question in is going to show you the answer. However, if you have Google in front of you, all access to all knowledge, right? It requires the question. You can't just have the connection. Most people have the connection. They don't realize that they have to direct the connection to receive something back. So they don't even recognize the fact that they have the connection in the first place. So absolutely. I mean, with someone like you and I, you are so my soul brother. We are definitely connected. I mean, it's very clear that we are on the same path. And it really just requires me to type into Google to say, or that universal Google to say, okay, well, what's our, Brandon and I's connection and where have we been before? But I'm definitely feeling much more of a cosmic connection with you. And I just feel like, I don't know. I just feel like you're so on the precipice of like fully understanding and fully letting go of the last remaining wall that you have up. And it's like not a human wall. It's more of like it's like this, what is it? Like, it's not fear. It's not questioning. It's, you've got some hesitation behind you rather than just a full open trust. And it has nothing to do with trusting the outside world, everything to do with fully trusting yourself. And maybe my, encounter with you in your life. And I know you're moving to Venice, which is amazing. So I'm sure we'll be encountering each other a lot more. But I'm sure that that's probably going to unlock something in you and also unlock something in me as well.
Lovely. I love all that. Yeah. One of the things that, when you talk about a holding back, it's like, This is it's a great example, actually, bringing up the Venice thing. It's a perfect, here's my instant answer to that. So as I'm going to do this new show, I envision it being, this show, I've been super blessed to, do really, really well and consistently in the top 5 in iTunes for several years, and, my respective category on iTunes. And, it's done wonderful. It's been a wonderful experience. I felt, and I've had about 5 intuitives probably over the course of the last 4 years come on and say, okay, you're going to do something in video, buckle up your seatbelt. It's a whole nother level. And I very much felt that intuitively. I'm not attached to it, whatever, but I feel like that's definitely coming. If I'm the master of my own universe, who else would step into a timeline where they have this, they help to bridge. I feel very called to be a bridge, and have had that experience with this show of being a bridge to people, especially those who are new on this path, or really helping people to maintain an elevated vibration, shift their perspectives. Because a lot of, it's one thing to hear about all this stuff, and then it's another to say, okay, what are real world perspectives to apply to situations and circumstances and rewire my neural network. And so I do a lot of that type of work, right? Let's rewire the way we think about everything over and over. So as I move into the new show like Optimistic, which I envision helping to really get into a more mainstream, crowd and expand to, from 20,000 people a day listening to maybe, millions a day listening. I instantly think of, I believe, I am open. I have a lot of real world grounded, like crazy synchronistic stuff between me, the audience, like all they hear all day, every day. I mean, I just have a lot of like almost grounded magical things happen, but not a lot of, I haven't had like, all of a sudden there's an entity in my room, or I am, dealing with this angelic being or astral traveling that I recall. And I 100% believe it's happening too. And I have people on all the time and tons of friends having this experience, but I always approach it as, I can only speak what's happened to me. I believe them. But I also, as I move into this next show, I think about it. It's like, okay, I don't want to blow it out of the water. If you want to be that bridge, you don't want to hit them over the head with a hammer necessarily right at first. You want to kind of bring them in slowly and then get super, super deep and go there. Like you're going there, which I've done lots of times on the show. But I thought even with that show, it's like, okay, at first I want to, I don't want to blow people out of the water who maybe if it's ends up on Netflix or whatever, it's like, okay, this is, whereas if I took it a little slower with people, then you get them. So that's what bubbles up for me when you talk about maybe sensing any sort of trepidation is like, I don't, there is a little bit of hold back. And I always will say it on this show. It's like, I'm open to it all. And I believe like everything that you've told me, like I can look at you and sense you. It's like, I don't think you're just sitting there making this up because you want to like BS your way through your life. Right. I mean, and I've had enough magical experiences myself to know. And for me, there's a lot of experience of like clear cognizance, kind of like, I feel like I can just see how it's structured and it feels so intuitively right. And then I apply it to my life and I get these amazing results with it, and it's like, okay, how does everyone not see and feel this? I got to help other people, and so that's been kind of my calling. So when you asked me before we turned on the microphone, do you channel? And it's like, I feel like my soul really wanted to be Brandon Beecham. Like, I look at someone like Esther. I share more clips from Esther Hicks than probably anyone on my daily shows because I love what's coming through. And I always say about channeling, it's like, I don't even care if it's really happening or not. What's the information? And a lot of times the people that claim to be channeling, it's the most high vibe, insanely brilliant stuff I've ever heard. So I definitely believe it. But I feel like for me, I feel like to some degree, every great piece of art is channeling. Every, what is coming through this voice right now? Well, a lot of people will say it's a composite entity, actually, and to some degree. And I guess from some relative truth, that's got to be correct if it's all one. So it gets a little heady and weird. But I do think with me personally, I came in really really wanted to fully be like, I don't think I'll ever drop in and all of a sudden I am speaking as, so-and-so.
Right.
But I think it's brilliant when people do, and I love it, and I love hearing it, and I love seeing it. And usually it's, I don't know if I've ever seen anyone, I'm like, okay, this person, like, what they're saying is just not even good, and it doesn't feel inspired. It doesn't feel high vibe. I don't even know if I've had, I'm sure it's out there. I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there. It's like, I'm going to make my living faking it all, but I don't think there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah. Well, it's so cool because I just put out a video and I get the same sort of things, which a lot of followers or people are like, wow, I was just experiencing this. And then you talked about it, right? And I'm sure you get that all the time as well, tapping into that collective vibration. And so just the other day, I put out a video and it was really good and it inspired a lot of people. And I wasn't really, even thinking that this was going to come through, but it was entitled, Why You Shouldn't Open Your Third Eye. And the whole video was about this whole new age spiritual community. It's great. I'm so loving the good vibes, but we are so getting attached to good vibes and white light and love energy all the time that we're actually missing the whole point of being human to begin with. Right? We're trying to be these beautiful beings of light and energy and entities and all these things. And yet we're not being who we are right now. I mean, if I signed up to meditate my whole life and miss out on tasting good wine and eating good food and meeting awesome people and laughing and crying and the whole human experience, then, if I just wanted to meditate and be a soul, I'm just going to go ahead and be a soul, right? It's really important. So when you say you came here to be Brandon, that's incredible to hear. And I really do think that you can be an amazing bridge for people. That's what people need, because right now, people like you and I, we've got a great base, but those are the teachers. Like right now, we've been teaching teachers, and the rest of the world is still completely blind. That's another, 6.9 billion people who are completely blind, who have no idea what's about to hit them in 2020 and beyond. And that's when we step up and say, okay, are you ready to expand? Because here we are, right? And the people who are going to really be attracted to you are probably going to be attracted to me as well, but at a different level, right? Because I know for a fact that I am way over, most people's heads, and that's okay. And I cannot water down the content anymore, but I will have my mom, and we need people like both of us, right? And my mom will call me up after my live video and she'll be like, so like you were talking about how everything behind us doesn't exist. I don't get that, right? Because I'm talking about wave particle duality, and if we don't observe it, it's just in a state of flux.
Does the tree fall? Does a tree make a noise if it falls in the woods and no one's there? It's like, well, is there even a tree? That's what I say. Is your bedroom even upstairs? I don't know.
It's totally. So yeah, it's good. It's such an exciting life.
It really, really is. We're all complementary. We all, sort of, I think, designed where the throttles are. And, we're up near like episode 1000 of this. Like, I don't know, somewhere probably this is probably going to be like episode 975-ish, something like that. And so episode 2 was an Akashic Records reader, actually, 3. And I remember distinctly, going back all those years ago, her saying, Brandon, you are here it's very important. Your soul's like, you're like, I'm envisioning you in the middle of a stream and there's all these things happening on the sides that you've helped to create, but you're supposed to stay in the center and not get too caught up on the shores, and definitely not get lost in the ether. Like, you're not supposed to get lost up there. You're supposed to help bring that down here. And so that feels like I think that's a very challenging thing for a lot of us, because we get so excited, it's like, oh my God, I'm ready to go explore all these other dimensions and all these other, and it's like, I just kind of want to float off. And so, I think that becomes kind of challenging for people, even people that have near-death experiences, who then come back and they're like depressed because they're like, oh my God, this, even my brother was telling me 2 nights ago, he had, he's someone who isn't really seeking this stuff. Like you, he's a Cancer, so very sensitive. And he has out-of-body experiences and things, and he's not even trying to do it. It's more like he was never first in line on the roller coaster. And, 2 nights ago, he's like, gosh, I had this incredibly lucid dream, and it was like so freeing, flying, and and then I'm back in my body, and I'm just like, oh God, this again, And so I think that's one of the challenges that arises too. I'm sure you've had that to some degree.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm living in two worlds simultaneously. It's pretty wild. But you know what? The more I understand that the higher I go, the more human I need to be, the more I'm enjoying every single aspect of being human. All of the smells, all of the tastes, all of the feels, all of the working out, all of the food, whatever. Food especially, because, as a gray, you don't consume, food in the same way. So
right.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
Wow. So have you seen a lot of your own future timelines, or do you get glimpses of future in this life?
Oh yes, future in this life. Yes, I've seen my children already. I believe. I've seen myself on stage in front of like tens of thousands of people, which has always been a dream of mine.
Wow, cool.
It's funny because when I got my first tattoo at 16. I asked myself, I'm like, I wonder if I'm ever going to get another tattoo. No, I'm definitely going to leave it at this one tattoo. And I had this vision instantly in that moment of me standing on stage, and I had an hour and a half long lecture, and the whole lecture was about me explaining the downloaded informations within each one of my tattoos. And I was like, I wasn't like covered, but like, I had a fair amount of tattoos.
Wow.
And each one of my tattoos are channeled right from the source. So every time I learn something, I put it on my body. And it's funny because the way that I look at tattoos is very opposite from the way that other people look at oh, it's permanent. Oh, you don't want to get that. It's permanent. And I say, no. The skin and the body itself is impermanent, but the message and the lesson and the download behind the tattoo is permanent. That is a universal truth. The body itself is impermanent, right? So I'm like, it doesn't, whatever. But so I have had many flashes when I was really trying to practice telepathy when I was 18. I said, what is my next big step? Like, what else can I do? Like, I'm like opening up, what else is possible? And I saw this vision of myself later in life with a coffee mug on a table and like just moving the coffee mug with my mind just straight across the table. I'm like, yes, that's possible. Okay. I'm on the right path. So yeah, I've seen clips of my future, but honestly, lucid dreaming, I used to do it all the time. Dreaming and sleep, it gets boring. It gets so boring when you control the dream. You're like, okay, now what? Okay, fly around again. Okay, now what? I want the sky to be purple. Okay, that's great. Now what? And it's like, I feel the same way about being psychic and being able to tap into the future. There's so many different parallel timelines. Why ruin the surprise? Why not go through life and be surprised in every single moment? Because life gets boring if you know it's about to happen. Dreams get boring if you know it's going to happen. So now I refuse to lucid dream and I refuse to tap into my future because I'm just here experiencing it in the moment.
I love it. I love that. I love that perspective. I think it's a really healthy one.
Yeah.
So what is one thing that excites you most right now? What is one topic, piece of info, something that's bubbled up for you that, you talked about just getting bored with some of that, some of these magical things. What is something that it really excites you right now?
It's really tough. There's a lot of things that excite me in every single moment. And every day I feel like it's different. But, I think one of the things that really excites me at this time is helping people understand the balance of love and fear, right? There's so many things that I channel and talk about all the time. And quantum physics really excites me, and understanding how to break through this matrix reality really excites me. But to bring it down to more of a 3D rudimentary level, something that I channeled in the past month is the fifth dimension is not just about love. The fifth dimension is about love and fear simultaneously coexisting so that we can choose which we want to experience in the moment. The fifth dimension is actually just the awareness of having a choice. It's not just all love and light. And that's why I have to, this is a really important message for people because they get so caught up and so down on themselves. Why didn't I make the right choice? Why do I feel sad? Or why do I feel depressed? I need to be all love and all light, or I need to be, in that fifth dimension. You can be in the fifth dimension and experience both. It's just the awareness and the choice in that moment of the reaction. that really empowers us and allows us to be at that frequency. So I would say, just understanding that fear is just as important as love, because fear allows us to grow and to move forward and to experience, happiness, right? Sadness allows us to experience happiness and vice versa. They cannot exist without the other.
Right. When you understand that all the challenging stuff, fear being right there at the top, is serving love, right? It's all, the way I view it is, it's all ultimately happening for love, so that love can exist, right? Which is the ultimate pleasure throughout eternity. And it can't really exist without these other aspects.
Well, the other thing too that's...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say, well, real quick, I was just going to say, one of my favorites to throw out is, you never see a beautiful work of art that doesn't have shadow in it, right? Imagine any painting with no shadow, right? It's necessary.
Yep. And another analogy that just came to mind is, a brighter a light you shine, the darker a shadow it casts, right? I mean, it's just the binary of this world, right?
Right.
So,
So that brings up a question. That brings up a question for me. So, I definitely feel like I'm here to shine a very bright light, and I feel very lit and excited about sharing perspectives on the ultimate nature of reality. And as I expand my own awareness and consciousness and play with the new tools and powers of manifestation and helping others to do the same thing, I have a child, and his mother is like, we're like yin and yang. Like, she is like kind of tapping in. If you were to talk to her, like, she's the only person I don't know that I ever believed in the idea of possession as a possibility, as a real until I saw what kind of happened to her as, over years. And now if you're to see her, it's like a possessed person, and very dark and very scary and very like everyone will be, it's like tapping into a lot of this information in a very twisted way. Like, if she were to see you, she'd probably go into something about how she is the ruler of this planet and she is the goddess that is the reason for it all. And those who have, tried to block her will be publicly executed, and just very dark, like scary, spooky stuff about torture. And, even looking at her is just scary. Like, oh my God, this is a possessed person. And so here I am on the whole other spectrum. And then our son is like very wise, very balanced, like, and just, so I look at it and I'm like, okay, intuitively is she somehow, and I did have someone tell me that one time, they're like, you guys have done this dance for like a lot of lifetimes where you counter each other's light and darkness. And so, so yes, when you say that, the brighter light, the darker, it's like, then you start thinking from the perspective, hold on. So this soul perhaps loves me so much that they're willing to take on this role of let me carry the darkness and pain so that you and my son can have this very bright path. And I don't know if that's what's going on, but intuitively it feels like there's some level of truth there. And then it turns from this like, oh my God, this scary, evil person who talks about me and my family being publicly executed and beheaded, I should actually appreciate and like, send love to, right? It's like the book, The Little Soul in the Sun. It's one of my favorites, a children's book. And it basically is like all these bad things or darkness that people carry, they're doing it as a gift to the others to have forgiveness, or it's like, and so when you start looking at it from that lens, what I do know is that lens, I can't say for sure that is the arrangement or not. Intuitively, I think there's some level of that happening. And, one thing that I do know, when I apply that lens, it brings compassion, it brings up love, it brings up acceptance, it brings up, all these good things within myself. So to me, that's the indicator that I'm on the right track in some way, like, right?
That's amazing. And it's just like, that guy who punched me in the face in Panama, I tell everyone the story and they're like, what? And then I'm like, yeah. And I have so much love for him. I have so much compassion. I'm so grateful that he held the space for both of us to release those past lifetimes. But for me, especially, to be able to go through that and release that. And for you to turn could potentially be such a dark situation into the light because you're just shining that light on it. And taking compassion. around her is really incredible and super honorable. And that definitely, says that you're on the right path if that's kind of the way that you're taking it.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the right way to deal with it. And, luckily I'm not in her day-to-day life, so I'm not challenged with bumping up against it every day. I mean, it would be a lot more,
Totally.
It would be a lot more challenging because her energy is so intense. I mean, it's like, I had a really trippy thing. Are you familiar with Shaman Durek? Do you know Shaman Durek? He does a podcast called Ancient Wisdom Today, and he's very much like yourself, He's like, I'm sitting here talking to you, Brandon, and I can tap into the guy down the street lifting weights. He's wearing this. He's thinking about this. He's, and him and I, when he was on the show, he was like, somehow she came up in the idea of possession. I think he might even brought it up, and I brought her up, and he's like, oh yeah, that's a Lavana spirit. Da, da, da. And he went into all these details about some entity named Lavana. And I'm like, okay, as I always am, I'm like, maybe so. I can't say for sure, but you're saying it very confidently here on the air, and you're giving me all these details. Here's how you deal with it. Here's what you could say to her to disempower her. Here's what she was when she was in physical. Here's how she accesses people like her who are receptive to her energy. Get this, Elizabeth. An hour after that, I'm like hanging out with my son, and I'm like, hey, Brad, you should listen to this interview I did with Durek. Like, he was really interested. He brought your mom up, and he said she's possessed by this woman named Lavana. I don't know. And he goes, Dad, that's what she named my new sister. I'm like, what? She had just had a baby, and she's had several, and her mom has to take them because, she can't even take care of herself. But yes. Then I had a woman named Lavana come up to me at an event later, within, I think it was the next day or something. A woman came up to me out at a public and started talking to me, and I'm like, oh, what's your name? Oh, Lavana. It's not like Amy or Sally or Elizabeth. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah.
No kidding. Validation.
Pretty wild.
Wow.
Pretty wild. Yeah. So I have a lot of stuff like that happen, just crazy,
Yep.
Okay,
cool.
this is 7 layers of the onion deep synchronicity. Speaking of, that is a question that I always love, and as we kind of wind down here, I love to hear a good story of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story. I'm sure you've already shared some, so I would let you off the hook if something didn't come to mind. But if you have a final story, nothing I love more than story time. So if you have a story you'd like to share, I would love to hear.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, once again, same thing, divine synchronicities happening all the time. So my girlfriend, she's a techie, but she's very clairaudient, and she also tends to duplicate things. So, and then us two together creates this vortex, and we just manifest things instantly the second we talk about them. It's really wild. So I'll give you two really cool stories. One of them is her car key fob, right? Her car fob. Mm-hmm. And, she only ever had, what was it? She only ever had one, right? She had two. She misplaced the one for years. It was just gone. I don't know. And so now we're both starting to drive her car, and she's like, I got to get a new one. So she ordered one in. And so then she goes missing, right? Or whatever. And so we only have the one. And then she's like, I'm going to go search around the car, right? And so she's in the car. She finds a key fob on the seat of the car, and she also simultaneously finds a key fob under the seat of the passenger car. And she comes home and she's like, hey, there's 2 key fobs in the car, and yet there's one still in the drawer here. So now we not only have the one that was always there, but then we have the one that she just ordered in, and then we have another one that was literally sitting on the seat of the passenger car in the Jeep. And so she's like, how did we go from 1 fob to 3 overnight? This is sort of wild. But that stuff happens all the time, right? So most recently, and this is so wild. So most recently, a couple weeks ago, we were talking. She's like, you know what? I'm working at my desk really late, and it's really dark in the corner, right? It's really dark on my desk. She's like, I really want a light for my desk, but she's like, I don't want something you can plug in because I don't have any more plugs. I want something that's slim and small because my desk is really messy or whatever, And so she's describing what she wants for a desk lamp, right? No word of a lie. 2 days later, okay, the weirdest thing. I'm doing the laundry. Okay, I'm take it from the laundry, whatever machine, washing machine. dryer machine, and I'm folding the laundry. I put all the folded laundry into a laundry bin. Then I put the laundry bin into the bedroom. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to put the laundry away. I'm like, okay, cool. And so she's putting the laundry away and she's like, oh, babe, like, thanks so much for buying me this desk lamp. I'm like, what do you mean buying you a desk lamp? She's like, didn't you like sneak in this like really awesome desk lamp? Like just like right in between the folded laundry. I'm like, what? No word of a lie. There is this really super ultra modern, super foldable, really flat LED, really awesome desk lamp that is folded, and in between the folded laundry that I just folded in the living room, put in the basket, sent it to the room. She's now putting it out and putting it away, and there it is, the lamp. And I'm like, I did not put that lamp in there. She's like, no. I'm like, yeah, I didn't put that lamp in there. Like, so somewhere in between this room and the next room, it was just manifested into our reality. And it's perfect. It's literally exactly what she described. I've never seen a lamp like it before. You know,
is it gold?
So wild. It was like a rose gold. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a feeling, as soon as you started talking about it, I just had a feeling about my lamp, which is gold, and you kept describing what it's like. So I am going to go in a minute, and I am going to take a picture of it and show it to you and see if it's the same lamp, because that would be epic. Yeah, okay, so it's a similar color and stuff, but yeah, they're different. But similar size and color, like... Interesting. Well, wow, that's so cool.
Wild. Right? I mean,
so what that's the only kind that could actually fold down and be stuffed into laundry.
Like it's the weirdest. It was just there, and it's the most perfect lamp ever.
Yeah. Wow. I like that.
Anyway, so that's my divine secret.
You guys have no idea where it came from, how it got there. No one else ever came forward and said, "That's my lamp."
No, we don't have anyone in our place.
Wow. Yeah. So cool. So much fun. Yeah, I think that's going to be a thing that I believe the future is going to be like the new great art form is going to be the art of manifestation. You know, that's like, that's going to be the thing. Like, how good of a manifester are you? Let's see what kind of creative manifestation that you can work up. So I think it's fascinating to hear those kind of stories where something just like pops into reality. You know, it's even, I think of the book, someone was just telling me about my son was telling me about the book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, where like this amulet just appeared, you know, physically manifested. And I'm sure you've heard different stories about that sort of thing. It's like, I think that sort of thing, as we collectively ascend, is going to just get more and more commonplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So cool.
Elizabeth, this has been awesome. You are so fun, such an inspiration. Let's see. I do have one last question I'd like to ask you. And well, actually, before I ask that question, why don't you take a moment and tell everyone where they can follow you, your work, you know, about your podcast, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I just started my podcast. It's called Expand. EXPAND, Expand, with Elizabeth April. And then you can also check out my website, ElizabethApril.com, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the socials. You know, I'm out there just kind of doing my thing and helping people and humanity awaken.
Yes, you are. I definitely feel completely wired and excited after this lengthy conversation. I have more energy than when I started, so I know that is always a good thing. I do have one final question, Elizabeth. It is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Elizabeth April?
What a loaded question.
Got to be cliche,
I would
you know.
say the meaning of life is to be here in the physical present moment, to just fully experience this individual reality while simultaneously being a soul full of infinite amounts of energy.
Well, I am happy to be here having that experience with you, Elizabeth April. You are such a pleasure, so lovely, so inspiring. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you so much, Brennan, for this epic conversation. And I will definitely be, connecting with you later on as well. Definitely love your vibe and keep up the good work yourself. You are doing incredible things for humanity. And I'm so happy to see that you are one of those bridges out there and that, we've got this support system, that everyone's being supported at this time.
Well, we are going to be neighbors soon. Everyone, all of you listening know, with the launch of Optimistic, Elizabeth is right there in LA. So I definitely am going to see to it that you come to the Mystic Manor. It's going to be such a good time. So, absolutely. I look forward to our paths crossing in 3D, 5D, wherever we are. I want to cross paths, and thank you. This has been awesome.
Likewise.
Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. Before we sign off, I wanted to let you all know that we have finally created the Game with the Universe on our website, where you can choose the first number that comes to your mind, and it'll pull up that episode number of the podcast. I've been saying this is a great way to co-create synchronicity and magic with your higher self for quite some time by doing this manually. But now if you go to positivehead.com/YO universe, there is a super fun and simple interface to play this game with your higher self. I firmly believe just by setting the intention to play in this way, it opens up the door for magic, and it's a synchronistic way to hone in on nuggets of wisdom out of the huge catalog of episodes that are specifically appropriate for you at this time in your journey to becoming the next greatest and grandest version of yourself. And it also makes for a super fun way to engage and invite friends, family, people on social media to check out the podcast as well. So be sure to check out positivehead.com/YOUNIVERSE and be sure to tell all your friends so they can play a game with the universe, which also helps the show to reach new people, which I greatly appreciate. And as a quick reminder, be sure to also check out positivehead.com/transformation if you're curious to learn more about Purium superfoods and why I take them every day. On this journey of becoming the next greatest and grandest version of ourselves that we have all embarked upon, I can't stress the importance of managing your physical vibration enough. And quite honestly, Purium has put together the simplest plan I've found to do so, and I'm sincerely excited to share it with all of you. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.